You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello out there in Archaeology Podcast land. This is Dr. Alan Garfinkel. I'm the president and founder of the California Rock Art Foundation. And what we do is we identify, evaluate, manage, and conserve rock art both in Alta California and in Baja California. We conduct field trips, we have trainings, exercise, we do research, and in every way possible, we try to preserve, protect, and coordinate treasures of Alta and Baja California rock art, of which there are many and diverse. We also work closely with Native Americans and partner with them to recognize and protect sacred sites. So for more info about the fabulous California Rock Art Foundation, you can go to carockart.org. Also, I'm open to give me a call, 805-312-2261. We would welcome sponsorship or underwriting, helping us to defray the costs of our podcasts, and also membership in California Rock Art Foundation. And of course, donations, since we are a 501c3 nonprofit scientific and educational corporation. God bless everyone out there in podcast land.
You're listening to the Rock Art Podcast. Join us every week for fascinating tales of rock art, adventure, and archaeology. Find our contact info in the show notes and send us your suggestions.
This is Alan Garfinkel, your host for episode 102. We're bringing back Tirtha Mukhopadhyay, Fulbright scholar from Mexico, talking about the Archaeology of Emotions. We'll be talking about rock art and how it is alive. Well, welcome everybody out there in Rock Art Podcast land. This is your host, Dr. Alan Garfinkel, and we're blessed and honored to have our most popular guest scholar, Dr. Tirtha Mukhopadhyay from Mexico, with us again. And we're going to call this particular episode sort of the Archaeology of Emotions Part 2. How about that, Tirtha? Are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you, Alan. Thank you very much for inviting me. And once again, always a pleasure to be with you. We could definitely call it Archaeology of Emotions Part 2. And it should lead us, as we were talking about it a few moments ago, we could generally try and also look at the origin of religions from the perspectives that we are.
Yeah, pick up that theme as well. So how would you like to kick it off, Doctor?
Yes, thank you, Alan. I guess we could start off from where we left in the last podcast conversation on the emotive quality of rock art templates.
And I've given that a lot of thought, and it's been interesting. You know, I was reflecting on that particular theme, and I went back and listened to some of my earlier episodes of the Rock Art Podcast and came across the piece that was done on archaeoacoustics. And I thought that it was rather remarkable because Steve Waller had said specifically how his spirits were buoyed, and he was shocked when he found that many, if not most, of the rock art sites that he has researched have an echophonic property, and that in part plays into this way in which the rocks begin to speak themselves. It's a mysterious and overwhelming and remarkable realm of communication where we have this flavor that the spirits themselves, the supernaturals, are communicating from inside the rock envelope. How's that?
Yes, that sounds interesting indeed. I guess you are also referring to the notion of the whole concept of psychoacoustics.
Yes.
Of place, yes. And primarily, even if we consider the very empirical nature of the location or the space that surrounds rock art, that incorporates and surrounds at the same time rock art representations, rock art depictions, the one thing that we are confronted with immediately is is the quality of the silence, the vast sway of nature and land, and untold yet, if we are sensitive to the properties of place, we seem to identify eerie feelings of being there, of being connected to very strange sensations of space, and above all, silence. I'm not very familiar with archaeoacoustics
Right.
in the sense that I do not have much experience or field experience studying archaeoacoustic properties. For instance, you have, I guess, done more studies on this theme along with our young scholar from Santa Cruz.
Right.
Chester.
But I think
Yes.
that what the issue is in a broader sense
Hmm.
is these particular sites have an inherent spirituality, and the images have a numinous nature by their very characterization. And the sites and places that are selected for rock art are often, if not overwhelmingly, remarkable places for their drama, for their particular topographic. What would you put it? It's sort of it's a landform that speaks to us. One of the things that came to me, which surprised the heck out of me, there was a woman that took a trip down Little Petroglyph Canyon
Right.
with me. She'd never been out there, and she's an author and had written a lot of children's books about some of this subject matter we're talking about the animal master and about some of his qualities.
Hmm.
And as she began to descend into the bowels of the earth, because the canyon itself is invisible until you get there and you see it, and it goes into the interior of the ground and goes deeper and deeper and deeper. She said, "Well, Alan, you've missed the whole point. This whole particular canyon, this whole landform, all of these images speak to the animal mistress, animal master concept." And she went through a chapter and verse and showed me how this is the underworld, netherworld of the supermundane beings that transmogrify and bring back the animals and allow them to live and be eternal beings.
Well, that's. I couldn't have narrated a more wonderful story, but surely the wind, the passage of winds, the path of winds, and the sounds that these natural forms make against each other through their interactions, and the very nature of silence in these vast ecologically alive and animated locations. These are
Absolutely.
and the shamans were so sensitive. They were. I mean, the word that's just coming to my mind right away is sensibilization, which is like you get to sensitize yourself to this deeply animistic talking nature. Talking Stones is that's the title of the documentary that you made on the Costa Rock Arts, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's very appropriate, because even when you're there and you're viewing these images at a rock art site, the images are silent and
Right.
you're silent, but you have this feeling, this sensitivity, this sort of overwhelming unction that the images have something to say. You don't know what they're saying, maybe, but you know that they're communicating to you.
This was absolutely one of those very interesting themes which were developed by some psychologists who were studying the effect of awe, AWEO, or wonder, the sense of vastness or admiration, and I was quite surprised to find this may not be a case of mathematical straitjacketing, but um, while studying the properties of all the aural effects, in fact, in archaeoacoustics, there is a prevalence of the term oralization of landscape.
Hmm.
So the
Okay.
landscape creates a holistic, a total integrated aura out of the interanimation of certain factors in the landscape. And in psychology, very interestingly, there are references to the psychological effects, effectances, as they call it in psychology. It's just one of those technical phrases that you use, affectance, motivation, and they speak of, they try to categorize or identify the several factors that create the oralization effect. And one of this is a sense of self, an altered time perception, which is born out of an intense engagement with the object of view, or with the sensation of sound, the acoustics, and you lose the sense of time, or you begin to feel a sense of more intenser time of being there, presence. There's reference in the literature to a sense of self diminishment, which is provoked by fear or some kind of supernatural sensation. And one of the other secondary factors which creates the sense of oralization is the context of the vastness of the landscape, of the sublime nature of those features, and the the flow of wind and the sound effects that they create. So the whole sense of self. So how do we characterize the feelings of a viewer who is placed in the middle of these formations, natural formations, and they are looking at these marks which on the rock surface, which are trying to tell them something. I have been to an underground location, a subterranean river location in central India, where the river keeps running for a couple of kilometers and creating very small cataracts, or these waterfalls, and the sensation of sound, water, and the silence within a subterranean passage, they come together with very eerie effects and motivations, or maybe even withdrawal, a sense of, the total oralized being that we associate with the landscapes.
So I think what we're talking about, and to sort of bring it somewhat of full circle, is we're talking about transcendence, or a transcendent feeling, some sort of connection to the celestial, supernatural creator beings, this overwhelming sense of connectivity. And I don't know, sensuality, I guess, is part of it too.
It's the hedonic tone, of that awareness, of that feeling, which is very exceptional, and yet which is something which is supernatural. And it's a very fertile ground for ritual experiences.
Yes. And it would make some sense to me that there would be ceremonies of dancing, singing, drumming, or other kinds of cooperative or collaborative or ceremonial groupings that would occur in association with those kinds of imagery. Am I correct?
Yes, this is what we could call, or what you just mentioned, the pro-social actions of being together and celebrating with the drums, the rhythmic unison, that rhythmic harmony that the most ancient musical forms create, some of which is, of course, still evident. The roots are evident in the tree, so to speak, and the organism even.
Yeah.
This anticipates a neuropsychology,
Mhm.
the neuropsychological reflections, or we might indulge here in trying to understand what this experience is like, and the one word which covers and recapitulates everything that we are trying to say here is perhaps animism. And animism, which should be understood as provoking these other orientations in the feelings, these transformations of the individual self.
Let's leave it there, and we'll pick it up on the next segment. Catch you on the flip-flop, gang.
Hey everybody, Chris Webster here to talk about one of the latest supporters to the Archaeology Podcast Network, the Motley Fool. Now, I've been investing in the stock market through various applications for a few years now, and everybody who's listening to this can benefit from that sort of investment for the long-term financial planning. And also, I know the hosts of these podcasts can benefit because as archaeologists, like none of us get retirement. We all have to kind of fend for ourselves. So investing in the stock market is a good idea, but not everybody can do it. And look, we get it. The market is complicated and confusing, and to many of us, it simply doesn't make sense. In fact, where do you even start? Take all of the guesswork out of it with the Motley Fool Stock Advisor. The Motley Fool has been around for over 25 years and has been spot on in recommending some of the world's most important companies before they hit the big time. I'm talking about Amazon, Tesla, Netflix, Starbucks, all before they exploded in value. With their easy to use and super informative service, Stock Advisor, you could join the ranks before they potentially find the next big thing. After all, their average stock recommendation is up over 400% as of April 10th, 2023. And no need to be intimidated by financial jargon or market complexities. As the name suggests, these guys don't take themselves too seriously. Now, finances, that's a different story. Their friendly and relaxed approach has helped over 700,000 people move closer to financial independence, all while beating the market and having fun. New members can access Stock Advisor for only $89 for their first year, a full $110 off the full list price. Don't sit on the sidelines and think about what could have happened. Visit the link in the show notes of this podcast to start your investing journey today. That's $110 discount off of $199 per year list price. Membership will renew annually at the then current list price. So again, check the link in the show notes of this episode.
Welcome back, all you archaeology podcasters, to the Rock Art Podcast. We're in our second segment. We're welcoming Tirtha Mukhopadhyay, talking about the archaeology of emotions and its relationship to rock art. Tirtha, I wanted to mention something that came to mind when we're talking about emotions and the group ceremonies. It appears to me that there's these aggregation events or aggregate events that occur for pre-literate peoples, and they try to time them to the seasonal round when there's sufficient food to support, a group of people. They would do a round dance, as they call it, and I think the women would be in one area and the men would be in another, and they would move around in a circle. And as they moved and they stopped with the drumming and the singing, they would pound the ground with their feet. And when asked by anthropologists why they did that, they said, "We're waking up Mother Earth and reminding her to replenish the needed foods, both plants and animals, and in turn provide the wherewithal that we need to sustain our lives."
That's a wonderful way of saying that the religions of the indigenous populations, not just in the Great Basin instance that you give here, but everywhere. I mean, in the dance, the rhythmic performances of these annual festivities of harvest, spring, when Mother Earth is coming back to life, and or in the promise of abundance. I mean, including such living customs as that of Halloween, for instance, and where it's all connected to how the earth gets replenished for us. So we also offer not just to ourselves but to the spirits. This is part of the that it's a very primitive belief that is still very active in our imaginations. And we can only make a fallacy, a categorical mistake, if we consider this as superstition, as a superstition of people who have not invented a positivist scientific view of the world, where nature is essentially dead and inanimate. And even in the literature of rock art, there is this growing recognition of the need to consider rock art to say that the only way of appreciating rock art is through an understanding of this kind of animistic lens, where the conventional anthropological distinctions between the subjects and inanimate objects out there in nature will no longer hold water, and that we have to set ourselves up as part of an active continuum. And so the distinction uh, that nature does not have life, that winds are not, the very movement of the winds and the interactions of these natural forces with rocks, the sway of trees, water, these are living things, and they have movement, in so to speak, even if they do not manifest the characteristics of biological life, but they are part of that foundation of the biome which makes life to appear in the first place.
Well, I always use this analogy. When the anthropologists and the researchers went down to South America to identify the psychotropic plants that were being used by shamans in terms of their ceremonies, their religious and their medical associations. They have an elaborate way of doing that. They have to use a certain plant. It has to be only certain parts of that plant. It has to be acquired at a certain season. It has to be mixed up with other plants, etc., etc. And it's elaborate. It's complex. It's something that would not be easily discerned. And the scientists and the medical professionals who are down there ask these native people, how the heck did you ever get to an understanding of how to employ these plants in such a way to use them medicinally and also to develop these altered states of consciousness and enter into this connection with the ethereal plane? And they had a very simple answer. They says, well, we talk to the plants and they tell us. and I know that's a bit, how would you put this? Maybe tongue in cheek, but it's not. These are entities that have agency and have life in them. And we may not understand that from a Cartesian or a Western understanding, but somehow or other, this knowledge has been discerned by the shamans and the ritual adepts to garner it from the natural world.
Yes, this was this notion, or we can call it a worldview, an attitude, a behavior which is ingrained in us. This tendency to ascribe anthropomorphic characteristics, human-like agencies to objects, to the plants, This is part of that continuum of not just plants, natural phenomena, or plants or animals, but also a chain which continues through the ministrations of the human being and connects us to the invisible, this plenum of gods, spirits, demons, spirit beings, soldiers, animal masters, and whenever humanity was portraying itself on the rocks, this story, it's a neo narrative. It's a narrative of the invisible. What is more interesting in this narrative, because all these depictions represent something moving forward. That word which is used in film criticism and film anthropology, the meta cinema, the
Mhm.
meta cinema of images. It's not what you see that tells us the story, but also what you don't see in the shot or on the screen, but something which you already know, the references that are already implicit in the sequence of images, which is the total experience of watching a movie or participating in a ritual performance of the kind that you mentioned, beating the earth so to wake it up, to make it sentient. I guess this kind of attitude of the religious believers is reflected in the depictions and in their perception of nature, and this could or should give us the right kind of instruments for looking not just at rock art, but also considering what we are. What is our portrait? Because the rock art divinities, the deities, are also portraits, self portraits made by humanity. Yet they are a portrait of a different self that is within us, within humanity, and a self which is endowed with power, with control, a self which is comforting, reassuring, a self which has given us a symbol of all the benedictions, of all the benefits and the abundance and fertility of life, and the great reassurance or comfort that despite the way generations are cut down in time and that we die and that the loved ones depart and pass on to the other side.
There's a continuity, there's a continuum, there's sort of an ethereal thread of life.
Just
And life is there emblazoned on the rocks. When you see emblazoned an upturned, bloated bighorn sheep with some sort of a dart in its belly, and then the next
yes,
image below it being a mother
mhm,
bighorn sheep with a small little infant sheep, it's the same binary opposition, the same thread, the same message, the same
right.
instantaneous communication of life and death, sustainability, again, some sort of reverence for the dilemma we have of dealing with our brief passage on the planet and the passage of time and the loss of life and the loss of loved ones.
This is something which has been pointed out by many philosophers and thinkers and traditions and different cultures and religions, isn't it? And that the human being has a tendency to anchor or latch on to something which may be a figment of the imagination or a fantasy, but yet at the same time, it's very emotionally, it is very true. It is an authentic human experience, and the way for us going forward as humanity, as pro-social animals, as being there together, dancing to the rhythm of the life that comes from nature, and that connects us to the cosmodrome.
And isn't this all sort of encircling or sort of referencing the origin of religion?
Yes, of course. And so the point that we return to here is that it's this emotive experiences at the base of all our religious and artistic expressions that matters, and that we begin to see them in the rock art. And that is what rock art teaches us. What teaches us rock art is what we are as humans. And if the shamans did not have any other message, they at least tried to remind us after several centuries, this great span of time. They have tried to show us that this that there is reason for us to be comforted and to be in the company of these gods and goddesses who are a reflection of our more refined and superior, more harmonious selves.
Absolutely. Well, that's the second segment. See you on the flip flop, gang. Welcome back, all you archaeology podcasters, to the Rock Art Podcast. We're taking a deep dive into the archaeology of emotions and talking about the origin of religion and what makes rock art tick. And during this last segment, we're going to talk a little bit about sacred narrative and the mythologies, the stories that are, in fact, emblazoned upon the stones and how those are characterized. Tirtha, kick it off for me, please.
Thank you very much, Alan. Yes, the last segment can be devoted to an understanding of, these, or extending the lessons that we learn from rock art. That beautiful narrative of sustenance, of sustainability, of being in tune with the logical, the harmony of the universe, call it the Tao of the universe, call it that sense of being out there, like Thoreau characterized, of man in wilderness.
And I think that in certain occasions, it's not. It may be common, it may be uncommon, to have the creation stories, the sacred narratives, actually depicted or characterized within the rock art imagery itself. Am I correct?
Yes, of course. But what seems more fascinating, I just wanted
Yes,
maybe
please.
I'm jumping with your kind
No, go.
permission, but the creation stories, they are so important to the sacred narratives of all cultures, irrespective of the time scale that we consider, not just in the cultures of Native America, of North America,
But throughout the world.
throughout the world, yes. The creation stories, for instance, the creation story in the book of Genesis, creation story in the sacred narrative of the Aztecs, the father and mother of Quetzalcoatl, the winged serpent, and this great, indifferent, maybe uh, inebriated, or intoxicated father creator who created and forgot about creation, and all these very nuanced, funny, interesting ways of storytelling that is inherent in the sacred narratives of the world. They point towards the creation of the world. But what I wanted to go ahead talking about is the way in which the narrators, the earliest narrators, handle the theme of time, because no amount of logical, rational narrative skills will enable humans to speak of a so-called past and creation, of coming forward to having been created at some point of time or through some phase of history. I mean, how do we speak of the whole story of creation in a moment, or through one metaphor, or through one image? That great challenge, it's a challenge that the very limits of being a human imposes on the storyteller. But at the same time, the metaphorical imagination, the sensitivity to the silence, towards the silence as much as towards the acoustics of it, this helps the narrator to talk about creation in the way they do in the sacred narratives of creation. For example, if we think of the book of Genesis and those 7 days in which God creates Adam, the creation of the human. Well, the male comes first, and Eve is created from the ribs of Adam, and that's that sequence. It's is it a time sequence? It's both a time sequence. It's both a narrative in time, and it's not in time. And from the deep waters, and God's spirit hovers over darkness of the waters, and then it's created. If you look at some of the African or South Asian or the Siberian myths of creation, there's the same reference to the waters, to a primeval ocean or a darkness, and the coming of a bird, or the command of a singbonga. I mean, some scholars have went out to the extent of identifying linguistic equivalents in the names and etymology of the gods and goddesses. We are dealing with a very long time frame of sacred narratives. But at the same time, there is this coming together of two principles, a male and a female, or darkness and light. And there is a creation. The world comes into being, and humanity appears. And this whole sacred narrative of creation and the deity, and it's a deity. This process, there could be no better way to incorporate that incredibly that infinite, that history on which occurred on a scale that would beat any kind of imagination, and it gets represented in a figure, in a human figure who did that. So what do we derive from that story of the egg, of a bird laying an egg in the darkness of waters? It's just that the answers are not to be found in not through a process of quantifications. The answers are to be found in our emotional responses to the world.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. It's meant to be evocative. It's meant to be emotional. It's meant to not only entertain, but tug at your heartstrings,
Right.
to further connect you to something beyond yourself, beyond your small and diminutive presence here on the globe, on Earth, and somehow feel that you're connected to something greater than yourself, some broad pattern, an epic story, correct?
Yes. The origins of epics and the creation stories. They all refer back to this understanding of a benevolence, of abundance, bounty. You could call it bounty even for humanity in its hunter-gatherer, forager context.
Yeah, yeah. In my publications, I've called them increase rights, or having some sort of
Right.
an understanding of a collaboration or a connection of a group of people trying to enforce some sort of a prayer or some sort of a benevolence from a supernatural deity. Is that correct?
Yes, of course. It's in the word increase, which increase rights. It's a very significant phrase, I guess, which appears in many of your papers on the rock arts, really, on the ethnography, the ethnographic records
Yeah.
of the cultures of the California.
We're dealing with issues of fertility. Obviously, it was incredibly important to the pre-literate societies to be able to have a child
Yes.
that's healthy, and have it live long enough to procreate and continue the bloodline. And
Yes.
that's not such an easy thing to do if you're a hunter-gatherer faced with starvation or faced with the vagaries of an environment that's unpredictable, correct?
Right, and moreover, the great danger of competing groups, competition, and survival, because it's also intrahuman that there are these untold, unexpected threats from different angles, and war, the possibility of the breakout of conflicts within those internecine tribes and populations for the same resources. And if you look at the story of Quetzalcoatl, who comes, Quetzalcoatl is like one of those versions of the legend of Quetzalcoatl among the Aztecs, and in generally not just the Aztecs, but also the other related, the contiguous cultures, like the word is Huasteca, the Huastecs,
Mm-hmm.
who refer to the various denominations that came into contact with the Aztecs, although the Aztecs were the most prominent ones and advanced. The material culture advancement was most prominently expressed among the Aztecs. But the Huastecas have one version of the Quetzalcoatl myth where Quetzalcoatl, where is he? He belongs to the winds, and he would come. And there's this prophecy, there's this prediction, who would come to a kingdom whose ruler is a warmonger, and who is violent, and who is irrational, who has to emit these negative energies, not just to defend, but there's no defense. There's only greed, perhaps symbolized in the figure of Huemak. And Quetzalcoatl appears when Quetzalcoatl really appears and confronts Huemak. The king is completely overwhelmed, not just by the power, by something physically identifiable, but by the peace, by the harmony, by the message, as Quetzalcoatl offers to bring together as all the conflicts and the dark energies of night, and to express as a god of the dawn. So the sense of the dawn, the divinity, is always identified with sustenance, as you call them, the increased rights, with peace, with all that is helps preserve the dynamics of the system rather than create a disequilibrium. And the sacred narratives are always returning us to this theme.
It's regenerative. If they're looking at the cosmos,
Right.
you've got the night star and the day star. You've got
The seasonal cycles.
the seasonal cycles, but also it has to do with sort of the resurrection of life from death. As the sun sets, it then arises. As the moon comes, it grows in pieces, and then it's birthed, and then it becomes invisible, and it comes back again. As you look at the natural world, it is shouting to you conceptually about the concept of a start, a finish, visible, invisible, light, dark, the underworld and the sky world. It's almost as though the environment is teaching you or showing you the cosmological nexus that you portray, correct?
And the story continues.
Yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, the story is about ready to end for us today.
Yes.
and so I'll give you the last word, Tirtha.
Well, it has been a great experience talking to you on this platform. And especially, I feel honored and privileged to have launched this notion of the archaeology of emotions. And I only hope that we take it forward, that our listeners also feel that there is much to think about in this whole project of the transformation of the positive sciences.
Sounds good. See you in the flip-flop, gang. Take care. Thank you, Tirtha. God bless.
Thank you.
And see you again shortly.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Art Podcast with Dr. Alan Garfinkel and Chris Webster. Find show notes and contact information at www.archpodnet.com/rockart. Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing this podcast with your family and friends. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.